When I collapsed at work, doctors alerted my parents. They didn't show. My sister shared a photo tagging me. Family day, no drama. I stayed silent. Days later, weak and wired to machines, I found 64 missed calls and Dad's text. "We need you now, answer." Imagine this. You're gasping for air, collapsing on the cold office floor, heart pounding like a war drum. Doctors scramble, dialing your parents in a frenzy, but they ghost you. No call, no visit. Then bam, your sister's smug Instagram post pops up, tagging you in a sunny family day, no drama pic, like you're the villain they erased. You bite your tongue, hooked to beeping machines in a sterile hell. Days drag on. Until your phone explodes with 64 missed calls and Dad's desperate plea. "We need you now. Answer." Without a second thought,
Hey, store lover. Welcome to the Narrative Hub, Reddit Stories. Believe me, this adventure gets wild, but it's only epic with you. Seriously, you make this possible. Want more stories? Greater adventure? Smash subscribe right now. Smash like. Comment below. Let's go.
But let me back up. Let me tell you the whole story, the one that took 30 years to unfold and 5 minutes to shatter completely. Let me tell you how I became the family's golden goose, the perpetual savior, and how one moment of physical collapse revealed the emotional wasteland I'd been living in my entire life. My name is Jennifer Smith, and I've been drowning in my family's expectations since I could hold a piggy bank. Picture this. I'm 8 years old, standing in the kitchen of our cramped 2-bedroom apartment, watching my mother count crumpled bills on the counter. Again, her fingers shake as she sorts ones from fives, muttering calculations under her breath. The rent notice, bright yellow and threatening, sits beside the coffee maker like a venomous snake. "Jenny," she says without looking up, "go get your birthday money from your room." My birthday was 3 days ago. $57 from grandparents, aunts, uncles, money I'd been planning to spend on the American Girl doll I'd been coveting for months. But I don't argue. Good daughters don't argue. Good daughters help their families. That was my first deposit into the bank of Jennifer Smith. Over the next 20 years, the withdrawals would never stop. By 16, I was working weekends at the local grocery store, not for spending money like my friends, but to help with the family restaurant my parents had impulsively purchased with no business experience and even less capital. While other teenagers were going to movies and buying cute clothes, I was calculating how many hours I needed to work to cover the industrial freezer repair. When my sister Michelle turned 18, she announced she was going to art school. Not community college, not state school, a prestigious private art institute with a tuition that made my mother cry. But somehow, magically, the money appeared. Loans in my name, co-signed with my perfectly good credit that I'd been building since I turned 18. "It's an investment in the family's future," Dad explained. "Michelle's going to be a famous artist someday." When my brother David got his first DUI at 19, guess who paid for the lawyer? When he got his second one at 21, guess who covered the court fees and the mandatory classes? By his third one at 23, I had a lawyer on speed dial and a separate savings account labeled David's Disasters. Each time the story was the same. "We'll pay you back as soon as things get better. This is just temporary. Family takes care of family." But things never got better. The restaurant limped along, bleeding money faster than I could earn it. Michelle graduated with her expensive degree and moved back home, spending her days painting abstract pieces that never sold while I worked 60-hour weeks to keep the lights on. David bounced from job to job, crisis to crisis, always needing just one more bailout to get back on his feet. And me, I became the family's emotional support ATM, dispensing money, solutions, and unconditional assistance on demand. By 28, I had perfected the art of living small so others could live large. My apartment was a studio in the least desirable part of town, not because I couldn't afford better, but because every extra dollar went to someone else's emergency. My car was a 10-year-old Honda with a taped-up side mirror and a radio that only worked on cloudy days. My wardrobe consisted of discount store basics and whatever professional clothes I could find at thrift stores. But the restaurant had new equipment every few months. Michelle's art studio in the basement, fully stocked with professional-grade supplies. David's apartment, nicer than mine, despite the fact that he hadn't held a steady job in 3 years. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was being a good daughter, a good sister. I told myself that someday, when everyone was stable, I could start living for myself. The warning signs were everywhere, but I was too deep in the fog of family obligation to see them clearly. Like the time I had to miss my college roommate's wedding because I couldn't afford the plane ticket. I just spent my vacation fund on new restaurant equipment. Or when I turned down a promotion that would have required relocating because the family needs me here. Or when I started having panic attacks in grocery stores because I was calculating the cost of everything in terms of how many hours of work it represented. My friends started expressing concern. "Jenny, you look exhausted. When's the last time you did something just for you? Don't you think it's time your family started standing on their own?" But I had been so thoroughly programmed to be the family's financial life support system that their questions felt like attacks. They didn't understand family loyalty. They didn't understand sacrifice. They didn't understand that some people have to carry heavier loads. What I didn't understand was that I wasn't carrying a load. I was being buried alive. The morning it happened started like any other. I dragged myself out of bed at 5:30 a.m., not because my job started early, but because I needed to stop by the restaurant before work to sign papers for yet another loan. The place was hemorrhaging money faster than ever, but Dad had convinced himself that a new marketing campaign would turn everything around. "Just one more time, Jenny," he'd pleaded the night before. "I know we've said it before, but this time is different. This marketing consultant knows what he's doing. We'll have this loan paid off in 6 months, tops." The marketing consultant, as it turned out, was some guy Dad had met at a bar who claimed to have revolutionized 3 other restaurants. His revolutionary strategy, a new paint job and some Facebook ads, cost $15,000. I signed the papers with a hand that shook from too much caffeine and too little sleep. My signature had become muscle memory, flowing across loan documents, credit applications, cosigner agreements, as natural as breathing. At work, I threw myself into the quarterly reports with the manic energy of someone trying to outrun their own thoughts. TechFlow Dynamics wasn't just my employer. It was my sanctuary, the one place where I was valued for my mind rather than my bank account. I'd been there for 4 years, slowly climbing the ladder, earning respect and recognition that felt real. But even sanctuary has its limits. The numbers on my screen started swimming around 10:30 a.m. I blinked hard, assuming it was just the usual fatigue, but the swimming got worse. The conference room felt like it was tilting sideways, and my chest began to feel like someone was sitting on it. A sharp, stabbing pain shot down my left arm, and suddenly I couldn't catch my breath. "I just need some air," I mumbled to my coworker Amy, who was sitting across from me reviewing the same reports. But as I stood up, the world tilted completely sideways. The last thing I remember was Amy's scream and the cold shock of the conference room floor against my cheek. Consciousness returned in fragments. First, the steady beep of monitors, then the antiseptic smell that can only mean hospital. Finally, the weird weight of wires and tubes attached to various parts of my body like I was some kind of cyborg. A nurse with kind eyes and graying hair was checking the machine next to my bed. When she saw I was awake, her face softened into a professional smile that somehow still felt genuine. "Welcome back, Jennifer. I'm Nancy. You gave everyone quite a scare." My throat felt like sandpaper, and when I tried to speak, only a croak came out. Nancy immediately offered me ice chips, and gradually the story came together. Massive cardiac event, stress-induced. My 28-year-old heart had essentially thrown in the towel, overwhelmed by years of chronic stress, poor sleep, and the kind of emotional exhaustion that no amount of rest can fix. I'd been in the ICU for 18 hours while doctors worked to stabilize my condition. "We called your emergency contacts," Nancy said gently, checking my IV line. "Your parents should be here soon." But here's the thing about hope. It's remarkably resilient, even when it shouldn't be. As I lay there, connected to machines that were keeping my heart beating in a steady rhythm, I actually felt optimistic. This would be a wake-up call for everyone. My family would realize how much stress I'd been under, how much I'd been sacrificing. They'd see that their constant financial crises had literally almost killed their daughter and sister. Things would change. Hour 1, I kept glancing at the door, expecting to see worried faces appearing at any moment. Hour 6, I started making excuses. Traffic was probably bad. They were probably trying to arrange care for the restaurant. Mom didn't like hospitals. Hour 12, the excuses were getting thinner, but I held on to them like life preservers. Hour 24. The chair beside my bed remained stubbornly empty. It was during hour 36 that my phone, charging on the nightstand, lit up with a familiar notification sound. Instagram. My heart rate monitor immediately started beeping faster. Even thinking about social media made my anxiety spike. But curiosity won over caution. The post was from Michelle's account, posted just 2 hours earlier. The image was beautifully composed. She'd always had an eye for photography. My parents sat at the center of a large round table at Rosario's, the fancy Italian place downtown that I'd never been able to afford. Michelle was to Mom's right, David to Dad's left. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle George were there, along with my cousins Lisa and Michael. Everyone was dressed up, champagne glasses raised in a toast, genuine smiles plastered across every face. The caption read, "Family Day, no drama finally got everyone together for a celebration." Some of the best times happen when we can all just relax and be ourselves. Blessed family time no drama, and there, tagged in the corner like a ghost, was my handle, at JenSmith28. I stared at that image for a long time, my heart rate monitor providing a soundtrack to my disbelief. They knew where I was. The hospital had called them over a day ago. They knew I'd collapsed at work, knew I was in the ICU, knew I'd suffered a major cardiac event at 28 years old. And their response was to go out for a celebration dinner. I screenshot that post. Some instinct told me I was going to need evidence of this moment, this choice, this public statement of their priorities. But the real gut punch came from the comments. Friends, family members, acquaintances, all celebrating this drama-free gathering. Finally, so nice to see everyone relaxed. You all look so happy. What's the occasion? Best family photos are the ones where everyone's actually smiling. Love seeing the whole crew together. Michelle had responded to several. Right, sometimes you need to just focus on the positive. And it's amazing what happens when everyone's in a good mood. The subtext was unmistakable. I was the drama they were celebrating being free from. My crisis, my near-death experience, my absence. It wasn't a tragedy to be worried about. It was a liberation to be celebrated. What followed were the longest 5 days of my life. Not because of the medical procedures or the physical recovery, though both were challenging. No, they were long because I had nothing to do but think, and thinking led me places I'd never allowed myself to go before. I started really examining my relationships with each family member, not through the rose-colored glasses of obligation and loyalty, but with the clarity that sometimes comes from nearly dying. Dad. Richard Williams was a dreamer who'd never met a get-rich-quick scheme he didn't love. The restaurant was just his latest fantasy, preceded by a failed catering business, a disastrous food truck venture, and 3 different pyramid schemes that had cost us thousands. But he had this way of talking about his dreams that made them sound inevitable, like success was just around the corner if we could all just hold on a little longer. And I, dutiful daughter that I was, kept providing the little longer funding that enabled his delusions. Mom, Patricia Williams, was the family's emotional manipulator, though she'd never see herself that way. She had perfected the art of the guilt trip, the strategic tear, the martyred sigh. When I questioned any financial request, she'd launch into detailed explanations of how hard things were, how much everyone was sacrificing, how disappointed she was that I seemed to care more about money than family. I'd been trained since childhood to interpret any boundary I set as selfishness, any question I asked as betrayal. Michelle, my younger sister by 2 years, Michelle had been positioned as the family's artistic genius from childhood. Her creativity was precious, her dreams were important, her future was bright, all of which somehow translated to her being exempt from financial responsibility. At 26, she'd never held a job longer than 6 months, never paid her own rent, never gone without something she wanted. She'd learned to weaponize her sensitivity, turning any request for accountability into an attack on her artistic soul. David. My older brother by 3 years, David was the family's designated screw-up, which paradoxically made him immune to real consequences. Every disaster, the DUIs, the job losses, the evictions, the gambling debts, was treated as a temporary setback rather than a pattern of irresponsible behavior. I was expected to clean up his messes because he's family, and everyone makes mistakes, and he's really trying this time. As I lay in that hospital bed, I realized that I wasn't part of a family. I was part of a financial ecosystem in which I was the sole producer and everyone else was a consumer. My value to them wasn't as a daughter or sister, but as a resource to be managed and exploited. The thought was so heretical, so contrary to everything I'd been taught about family loyalty, that it made me physically nauseous. But once it took root, I couldn't shake it. By day 3, I started paying attention to the staff interactions around me. Nancy, my primary nurse, had become a familiar comfort. She was probably in her 50s, with laugh lines that suggested she smiled often and tired eyes that suggested she'd seen a lot of heartbreak. "Your friend Amy calls every few hours to check on you," she mentioned during one of her routine checks. "She seems lovely." Amy, my coworker who had witnessed my collapse and rode with me in the ambulance, who had been visiting every day after work, bringing crossword puzzles and gossip from the office, who had contacted my landlord to explain my absence and arranged for my mail to be held. "What about family visitors?" I asked, though I knew the answer. Nancy's expression grew carefully neutral. "Everyone shows love differently," she said diplomatically, but her kindness made the absence even more glaring. Dr. Rodriguez, my cardiologist, was more direct. "The stress level that caused this event didn't develop overnight," she told me during morning rounds on day 4. "This is the result of chronic, sustained pressure over years. Your body has been in fight or flight mode for so long that it forgot how to relax. What we need to figure out is how to eliminate the stressors that put you here, or this will happen again." I nodded like I understood, but inside I was screaming. How do you eliminate stressors when the stressors are your entire family? How do you cut out the pressure when the pressure comes from people you've been taught to love unconditionally? On the morning of day 5, I was finally transferred out of the ICU to a regular cardiac unit. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about my recovery, though they stressed that major lifestyle changes would be necessary. I was beginning to think about what those changes might look like when my phone, silent for nearly a week, began to ring. Not just once. Constantly. It started around 10 a.m. with a call from Dad that I let go to voicemail, then another, then one from Mom, then Michelle. By noon, the calls were coming every 10 or 15 minutes from various family members. By 3 p.m., they were constant enough that I had to turn the ringer off because it was disturbing other patients. Through my network of friends, real friends who had been checking on me throughout my hospitalization, I learned what had happened. Amy, bless her, had become my inadvertent intelligence source. Apparently, the restaurant had received an eviction notice. Not just a late rent warning, but actual legal eviction proceedings. The landlord wanted 3 months of back rent, $12,000 immediately, or they were out in 30 days. The new marketing campaign had been a spectacular failure, generating exactly 3 new customers and 0 additional revenue. But that wasn't all. Michelle's big break, the gallery showing she'd been planning for 8 months, had hit a snag. Her main investor, some guy she'd been dating who had promised to fund the event, had disappeared, taking her deposit with him. She needed $5,000 immediately to pay for the venue, the catering, the promotional materials. Her entire artistic future hung in the balance. And David's legal troubles had evolved. His license suspension had turned into potential jail time when he'd been caught driving without a license. His lawyer was demanding another $8,000 for an appeal, and there was a court date looming in 2 weeks. $25,000 in immediate family emergencies. All landing at once, like the universe's cruel joke. They needed their human ATM, and she wasn't answering her phone. I watched the missed calls pile up. 23, 31, 47, 56. Each voicemail was a masterclass in escalating manipulation. Dad's first message was casual, almost cheerful. "Hey Jenny, hope you're feeling better. Give us a call when you get a chance. Nothing urgent, just want to check in." By message number 10, the tone had shifted. "Jennifer, we really need to talk. There are some time-sensitive issues we need to discuss. Call me back today." Message 15 was more direct. "Jennifer, I don't know why you're not answering your phone, but this is serious. We need your help with something important. Stop playing games and call us back." Message 32 dropped all pretense. "Jennifer, this is your father. I don't know what's gotten into you, but your family needs you right now. Whatever you're upset about, we can discuss it later. Right now, we have real problems that need real solutions. Call me back immediately." By message 58, the desperation was palpable. "Jenny, please, I know we should have visited you in the hospital. We feel terrible about that. but right now we need you more than ever. Everything is falling apart, and you're the only one who can help us. Please don't abandon your family when we need you most." The final message, number 64, came at 11:47 p.m. "Jennifer, this is an emergency. We need you now. Answer your phone. This is about more than money. This is about keeping our family together. If you don't help us, we're going to lose everything. Everything. Don't make us beg." I listened to all 64 messages in one sitting, my heart rate monitor providing a steady soundtrack to my rising blood pressure. 20 years of family dynamics distilled into 2 hours of voicemails. Not once, not in a single message, did anyone ask how I was feeling. No one mentioned my cardiac event. No one acknowledged that I'd nearly died. No one apologized for not visiting. The closest anyone came to addressing my hospitalization was Dad's throwaway comment about feeling terrible about not visiting, immediately followed by, "But right now we need you more than ever." I was not a daughter who had almost died. I was a malfunctioning ATM that needed to get back online. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the hospital noises or the uncomfortable bed, but because something fundamental had shifted in my understanding of myself and my relationships. For the first time in my adult life, I held all the cards. The people who had trained me to prioritize their needs above my own were desperate, and I was under no obligation to rescue them. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I asked Nancy for a legal pad and spent the hours between midnight and dawn writing. Not to my family, but to myself. I made lists, calculations, timelines. I documented every major financial contribution I'd made to family members over the past 10 years, complete with dates, amounts, and outcomes. The total was staggering. Over $120,000 in direct financial support. Money for the restaurant, money for Michelle's education and art supplies, money for David's legal problems and living expenses, money for family emergencies that seemed to strike with clockwork regularity. Not loans, gifts, money given freely with promises of repayment that never materialized. I calculated what that money could have bought me. A nice apartment, a reliable car, vacations, a graduate degree, a down payment on a house, a retirement fund that wasn't laughably small. I could have been living an entirely different life if I hadn't been subsidizing everyone else's. But more than the money, I began to see the emotional cost. The anxiety attacks, the insomnia, the way I'd learned to calculate the financial impact of every decision, the relationships I'd avoided because I couldn't afford to participate fully, the dreams I'd deferred because someone else's crisis always took priority. I had been so busy being the family's financial life support system that I'd forgotten to live my own life. As dawn broke through the hospital window, I made a decision that would change everything. I turned off my phone. When I finally turned my phone back on 3 days later, there were 127 new missed calls and a voicemail box so full it wouldn't accept new messages. But I didn't listen to them. Instead, I called my lawyer. I'd met Jennifer Martinez 2 years earlier when I was helping David with one of his legal issues. She was sharp, no nonsense, and had made an offhand comment that had stuck with me. "Someday you're going to need to protect yourself from the people you're protecting." That day had arrived. "Jennifer, I need to formalize some family financial arrangements," I told her. "About time," she said, without a trace of surprise. "Come in tomorrow and bring documentation of everything you can remember." The meeting was illuminating. Jennifer reviewed my hastily assembled financial records with the practiced eye of someone who'd seen this pattern before. "You realize you have grounds for civil suits against multiple family members," she said matter-of-factly. "This level of financial exploitation, especially from family members who clearly have the means to repay, constitutes fraud in some cases." "I don't want to sue anyone," I said quickly. "I just want clear boundaries and expectations." "Then we'll draft demand letters. Professional, courteous, but legally binding. We'll establish payment schedules with reasonable terms and clear consequences for noncompliance. And if they refuse," Jennifer's smile was sharp, "then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But Jennifer, people who have been taking advantage of your generosity for years don't usually respond well to boundaries. Be prepared for them to get ugly before they get better." The letters were works of art. Professional enough to be taken seriously, detailed enough to be legally binding, and personal enough to make it clear that I was done being the family doormat. Each letter outlined specific amounts owed, provided a reasonable payment schedule, and included a clear statement of consequences for noncompliance. They were delivered by certified mail on a Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, my phone was ringing again. This time, I answered. Jennifer, Dad's voice was a mixture of relief and outrage. Thank God you're finally answering. We got these ridiculous letters from some lawyer. What kind of sick joke is this? It's not a joke, Dad. It's a legal document. Legal document. We're family. Family doesn't charge family interest. Family also doesn't abandon family in the ICU, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing heart. That's different. You know hospitals make us uncomfortable. And besides, you're fine now. There it was, the dismissal I'd been expecting. My near-death experience was an inconvenience to be brushed aside, not a crisis that required their attention or concern. I nearly died, Dad. My heart stopped. I was alone for 5 days. We weren't. You were celebrating. I saw the photo. Silence. For a moment, I thought he might actually acknowledge what they had done. But then, Michelle was just trying to keep things positive during a difficult time. Difficult for who? I'm the one who was in the hospital. Look, we can discuss all this later. Right now, we have real problems. The restaurant is going to close if you don't help us. Michelle's entire career is on the line. David could go to jail. And where were you when I could have died? We came as soon as we could. The lie was so blatant, so insulting to my intelligence that something inside me snapped. Dad, stop, just stop. You didn't come at all. Not on day 1, not on day 2, not on day 5. You came when you needed money, not when I needed you. You're being emotional, you're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in years. The restaurant will close, Jennifer. 20 years of building this business and it will all be gone. Is that what you want? To destroy everything we've worked for? I almost laughed at the irony. We haven't worked for anything, Dad. I have. I've worked 60 hours a week for 4 years to keep that restaurant afloat, while you chased one fantasy after another. That's not fair. What's not fair is expecting your daughter to fund your dreams while you can't be bothered to visit her in the ICU. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, cycling through every manipulation tactic in the family playbook. Guilt about family obligation. Reminders of everything they'd done for me as a child. Threats about what people would think if I abandoned my family in their darkest hour. Promises that this time would be different, this time they'd pay me back, this time they'd really turn things around. But here's the thing about nearly dying alone in a hospital bed. It gives you perspective on what actually matters and what's just noise. Dad, I said finally, cutting through his latest lecture about family loyalty. I'm going to stop you right there. Sorry, I nearly died, and I'll need every cent I have to recover. The lawyer's letters stand. You can pay me back according to the schedule, or we can discuss it in court. But Jennifer, no buts, no exceptions, no negotiations. You want to be treated like family, then act like family. You want to be treated like business associates, then we'll operate like business associates. I hung up. Within 10 minutes, my phone was ringing again. This time it was Mom. Jennifer Marie Smith, Mom began, using my full name like I was 12 years old and had just tracked mud through the house. I cannot believe what your father just told me. Which part? The part where I almost died, or the part where none of you bothered to visit? Don't be dramatic. We were going to visit, but we didn't want to overwhelm you while you were recovering. Another lie, delivered with such conviction that I almost admired the skill. Mom, you posted celebration photos while I was in the ICU. That was Michelle's idea, not mine. And it wasn't a celebration, it was just dinner. At the most expensive restaurant in town. We deserved one nice evening after everything we've been going through with the business. The entitlement was breathtaking. While I was fighting for my life, they deserved a nice evening to cope with their stress. And now you're punishing us for it, Mom continued, her voice taking on that wounded quality I knew so well. You're holding our love hostage over money. I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm asking to be paid back for money I've already given you. Family doesn't keep score, Jennifer. You're right. Family shows up when you collapse. Family doesn't celebrate your absence. Family doesn't ignore you for 5 days and then blow up your phone when they need money. We feel terrible about not visiting, do you? Because your behavior suggests otherwise. Mom tried a different approach. You're upset and you have every right to be, but taking it out on the whole family isn't going to solve anything. Michelle is devastated. She's been crying for days. Michelle should be crying. She posted a celebration photo while I was in the ICU. She didn't mean it that way. How did she mean it, Mom? Help me understand how. Family Day. No drama with me tagged in the corner was supposed to be supportive. Silence, then, she was just trying to keep things positive. At my expense, while I was literally fighting for my life. You're being overly sensitive. And there it was, the classic family gaslighting. My feelings about being abandoned during a medical crisis were overly sensitive. My hurt at being publicly excluded was dramatic. My desire to be treated with basic human decency was punishing them. Mom, I'm done. The letters from the lawyer are final. You can pay me back, or we can let the courts decide. But I'm not going to keep funding everyone else's life while you treat me like garbage. Jennifer, please. I hung up. The calls kept coming. Michelle, sobbing about her ruined art career and how I was destroying her dreams. David, alternating between threats and manipulation, claiming I was abandoning him to go to jail. Various aunts, uncles, and cousins who had somehow heard about the situation and felt qualified to weigh in on family loyalty and forgiveness. Each conversation followed the same pattern, minimizing my medical crisis, maximizing their current problems, and positioning me as the villain for expecting basic respect and accountability. But something had fundamentally changed in me during those 5 days in the hospital. I had discovered my backbone, and I wasn't willing to remove it to make other people comfortable. While my biological family was melting down over my newfound boundaries, something beautiful was happening with the people who actually cared about my well-being. Amy, my coworker who had witnessed my collapse, organized a meal train for my recovery. Not because I asked, not because she owed me anything, but because she genuinely wanted to help. For 2 weeks, different coworkers and friends delivered home-cooked meals, groceries, and companionship. Mrs. Chen, my 70-year-old neighbor who barely spoke English, had been watering my plants and collecting my mail since the day I was hospitalized. When I thanked her, she patted my hand and said, "Family take care of family," in her careful English. The irony wasn't lost on me. My college roommate Lisa flew in from Chicago just to spend a weekend helping me organize my apartment and meal prep for the coming weeks. She took one look at my Spartan living conditions, the second-hand furniture, the bare walls, the complete absence of anything decorative or personal, and immediately understood the scope of the problem. "Jenny, you've been living like a monk," she said, not unkindly. "When's the last time you bought something just because you wanted it?" I couldn't remember. My hiking group, a collection of outdoor enthusiasts I joined the previous year in a rare moment of self-care, rallied around me like a protective army. They organized shifts to drive me to medical appointments, brought me books and puzzles during the boring parts of recovery, and most importantly, treated my cardiac event like the serious medical crisis it was rather than an inconvenience to be minimized. These people, coworkers, neighbors, friends, near strangers, showed me what actual family looked like. They demonstrated care without expectation of return. They offered support without keeping score. They showed up not because they needed something from me, but because they valued my presence in their lives. What happened to me was a clear testament to the fact that blood relationships don't always equate to genuine love. There are family members who will betray you for money or status, while strangers become a solid support system. True kinship is not a title you are given at birth. It is a relationship that you choose and nurture with affection, trust, and mutual respect. I realize that my story proves it. Blood doesn't always equal loyalty. 3 weeks after the lawyer's letters were delivered, I received my first payment. Dad had somehow scrapped together the minimum monthly amount outlined in his payment plan, $400. It came with a passive-aggressive note. "Hope you're happy. The restaurant is struggling because of this, but I guess family loyalty doesn't matter anymore." I deposited the check without comment. Michelle's response was more dramatic. She showed up at my apartment unannounced on a Tuesday evening, tears streaming down her face, clutching a portfolio of her artwork. "How can you do this to me?" she demanded before I'd even fully opened the door. "Look at these pieces, look at what I've created. This is my calling, my gift to the world, and you're destroying it over money." I looked at the paintings she was showing me. They were technically competent but emotionally empty, abstract swirls of color that felt like expensive decorations rather than artistic expressions. But that wasn't the point. "Michelle, I'm not destroying anything. I'm asking to be paid back for money I already gave you. You can't seriously be charging your own sister interest on helping her pursue her dreams." "What about my dreams?" "What dreams? You work in tech. You make good money. You don't have artistic aspirations. The dismissal was so casual, so complete, that it took my breath away. In Michelle's worldview, my life had no value beyond its utility to her pursuits. You're right, I said quietly. I don't have artistic aspirations, but I had dreams of owning a home someday, dreams of traveling, dreams of not working 60 hours a week to fund other people's ambitions, dreams of having a family support system that actually supports me when I need it. That's different. How? Because. She floundered, realizing she'd painted herself into a corner. Because your dreams are just material things. Mine are about creating beauty in the world. And my material dreams don't matter because. You're being deliberately obtuse. No, I'm being clear. For the first time in my life, I'm being completely clear about what I need and expect. She tried a different approach, sinking onto my second-hand couch with theatrical despair. You're taking this hospital thing way too personally. Yes, the timing of that post was unfortunate. Unfortunate. Poor choice of words, but you can't seriously hold that against us forever. People make mistakes. I sat down across from her, studying this person who shared my DNA but seemed to inhabit a completely different moral universe. Michelle, I want you to really think about this. I collapsed at work. I nearly died. I was alone in the ICU for 5 days. During those 5 days, instead of visiting or even calling the hospital to check on my condition, you organized a family celebration dinner and posted photos online with the caption, "No drama." You tagged me in those photos while I was unconscious and hooked to machines. Can you understand how that felt? For a moment, something flickered across her face. Shame, maybe. Recognition of the cruelty. But then she doubled down. We didn't know how serious it was. The hospital said you were stable. Another lie. The hospital had been very clear about the severity of my condition when they called. Even if that were true, which we both know it isn't, what kind of family celebrates being away from one of their members? What kind of sister tags someone in a no-drama post while they're in the hospital? You're right, she said suddenly, and for a moment I thought we might actually have a breakthrough. I should have deleted that post the second I realized how it looked. I should have visited. I should have put your needs first. Relief flooded through me. Finally, an acknowledgement, but you can't punish me forever. I'm your sister. I need you. And there it was. The fake apology followed immediately by another demand. She wasn't sorry about her behavior. She was sorry about the consequences. Michelle, the lawyer's letter stands. You can pay me back according to the schedule we outlined, or we can involve the courts. Those are your options. You're destroying my life over money. No, I'm finally protecting my life. There's a difference. She stormed out, but not before delivering one final manipulation. Mom and Dad are right about you. You've changed. The old Jennifer would never have been this cruel to her own family. The old Jennifer, I realized after she left, had nearly died from the stress of being everyone else's emotional and financial support system. Maybe it was time for a new Jennifer. David's response was the most predictable. He showed up at my apartment the following Saturday evening, drunk and belligerent, demanding to know what had gotten into me. You think you're better than us now, he slurred, swaying slightly in my doorway. Miss High and Mighty with her fancy lawyer and her grudges. I think I deserve basic respect from my family. Respect, he laughed bitterly. What about respect for everything Mom and Dad did for you growing up? What about respect for family loyalty? What about respect for the fact that I nearly died and you couldn't be bothered to visit? That's ancient history. We're talking about now, about real problems that need real solutions. The dismissal was so casual, so complete, that I felt something cold settle in my chest. My cardiac event wasn't a trauma they needed to acknowledge or learn from. It was ancient history to be brushed aside in favor of their current crisis. Get out, David. You can't just abandon your family because your feelings got hurt. I said get out. Not leaving until you listen to reason. I pulled out my phone and started dialing 911. You have 30 seconds to leave my apartment voluntarily, or the police will remove you. He left, but not before punching my door frame and shouting loud enough for the entire building to hear. You'll regret this, Jennifer. Family is all you have, and you're throwing it away. As I watched him stumble toward his car, the car I'd helped him buy after his last one was impounded, I realized he was right about one thing. Family was all I'd had, but it hadn't been much. The extended family campaign began in earnest after that. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends started reaching out with concerned messages about the situation. Each conversation followed the same script. We're worried about you. Family is everything. Surely you can find it in your heart to forgive. They didn't mean to hurt you. This is tearing the family apart. But here's what they weren't saying. No one was worried about my health. No one was asking about my recovery. No one was acknowledging that the family had already been torn apart by years of taking me for granted, treating me like an ATM, and ultimately abandoning me during a medical crisis. They were worried about the money. They were worried about consequences. They were worried that other family members might start setting boundaries too. I started responding to these interventions with a simple question. Did you know I was in the ICU for 5 days and no one visited? The responses were telling. Well, hospitals are depressing places. I'm sure they wanted to give you space to recover. They were probably just processing their own feelings. You know how your parents are about medical situations. Excuse after excuse, rationalization after rationalization. But not one person said what needed to be said. That was wrong, and you deserved better. 6 weeks after my cardiac event, I was clearing out old files when I discovered something that changed my understanding of the family dynamics completely. Tucked in a folder of restaurant documents was a bank statement I'd never seen before. It was for an account under my parents' names, dated from 3 months earlier. The balance was over $40,000. $40,000. While I was working 60-hour weeks and living in a studio apartment, while I was having panic attacks in grocery stores because I was calculating the cost of everything in terms of work hours, while I was pouring my life savings into keeping their business afloat, they had $40,000 sitting in a savings account. I drove to the bank that afternoon and, using my status as a cosigner on multiple restaurant-related loans, requested additional account information. What I discovered made me physically ill. Not only did they have substantial savings, but they'd been taking loans against the restaurant's value loans that didn't require my cosignature, and using that money for personal expenses. Vacations to Europe. A new car for Mom. Expensive art supplies for Michelle that went far beyond what I'd been buying. Legal fees for David that were triple what they'd told me. I wasn't just their ATM. I was their backup ATM. They were using my money as supplemental income while living off of debt secured against the business I was helping to prop up. The betrayal was so complete, so calculating, that I had to pull over on the drive home because my hands were shaking too hard to steer safely. That evening, I called Jennifer Martinez. I need to revise those demand letters, I told her. What did you find? When I explained the situation, she was quiet for a long moment. Jennifer, this isn't just family exploitation anymore. This is fraud. They've been using your credit and financial contributions under false pretenses while maintaining undisclosed assets. You could pursue criminal charges. I don't want them in jail. I just want them out of my life. Then we revised the letters with full asset disclosure requirements and immediate payment demands. If they have $40,000 in savings, they can start paying you back immediately instead of making minimum payments while crying poverty. The revised letters were delivered the next day. The phone calls that followed were illuminating. You had us investigated. Dad's voice was incredulous, as if my discovery of their deception was somehow more offensive than the deception itself. I accessed financial information I was legally entitled to see as a cosigner. That's a violation of privacy. You lying about being broke while sitting on $40,000 is a violation of trust. That money isn't available. It's earmarked for emergencies. What emergency could be bigger than your daughter nearly dying? Silence. Then, that's different. That money is for business emergencies. So the restaurant's rent crisis isn't a business emergency. Well, it's complicated. It's not complicated, Dad. You have the money to solve your current problems. You've always had money. You just preferred to use mine. Never asked you to. You asked me to fund your business while you were secretly maintaining a savings account worth more than my annual salary. That's not how it works. You can't just... I can, and I am. The new payment schedule requires immediate payment of $10,000, followed by monthly payments of $2,000 until the balance is settled. Since you clearly have the means, I expect the first payment within the week. That's impossible. No, it's inconvenient. There's a difference. Mom's call came an hour later, and it was pure manipulation from start to finish. I cannot believe you're extorting your own parents. I'm collecting on debts you've acknowledged you owe. We raised you, fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head for 18 years, and this is how you repay us. By nearly dying from the stress of subsidizing your lifestyle while you lied about your financial situation. We never lied. You have $40,000 in savings, Mom. That's not your concern. It became my concern when you told me you were broke and needed my help to avoid losing everything. Family helps family without keeping score. Then why didn't family help family when I was in the ICU? The conversation devolved from there, but the pattern was clear. They weren't sorry about deceiving me. They weren't sorry about abandoning me during a medical crisis. They were sorry about being caught and held accountable. Michelle's response was the most revealing. She didn't call. She sent a long, rambling email that was essentially a manifesto about artistic purity and family betrayal. "I can't believe you've become this person," it began. "The Jennifer I grew up with would never have chosen money over family. But I guess success changes people. Maybe you've forgotten what it's like to struggle for your dreams, to need support from people who love you. Artists have always depended on patrons who believe in their vision." I thought my own sister would understand that some things are more important than money. But apparently, I was wrong about who you really are. Email continued for 3 pages, painting me as a greedy sellout who had abandoned my family for material gain, with no mention of the medical crisis, the social media post, or the years of financial exploitation. In Michelle's narrative, I was the villain and she was the victim. I forwarded the email to Jennifer Martinez with a note. "Is this what gaslighting looks like in writing?" Her response was swift. "Yes, and it's also evidence of their mindset for any future legal proceedings." While my biological family was having collective hysteria over being held accountable, my chosen family was rallying around me in ways that continually amazed me. Amy had become not just a coworker, but a genuine friend. When she learned about the financial deception, her response was swift and practical. "You need to see a therapist who specializes in family trauma. This level of manipulation doesn't develop overnight, and you're going to need professional help to process it." She was right. I started seeing Dr. Sarah Kim, a therapist who specialized in family dysfunction and financial abuse. The term financial abuse had never occurred to me, but Dr. Kim explained it clearly. Financial abuse is the use of money to control, manipulate, or exploit someone. It often involves isolating the victim from their resources, making them financially dependent, or using guilt and obligation to maintain access to their money. What your family did lying about their financial situation while pressuring you to provide support, using your credit without full disclosure, and maintaining secret assets while claiming poverty, fits the textbook definition. "Their family," I said, the old programming dying hard. "That makes it worse, not better. Family members have more access to your vulnerabilities, more knowledge of your emotional triggers, and more social protection from consequences. Society tells us that family dysfunction is normal, that we should forgive anything from relatives, that blood is thicker than water. But healthy families don't exploit their members financially or emotionally." Dr. Kim helped me understand that my cardiac event wasn't just caused by work stress. It was the result of years of chronic emotional and financial abuse disguised as family obligation. My body had literally given out under the weight of carrying everyone else's burdens while neglecting my own needs. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor, had become an unexpected source of wisdom. Despite our language barrier, she seemed to understand the situation intuitively. One evening, as she was returning my spare apartment key after watering my plants, she said, "Bad family worse than no family. Good family very precious. You choose good family now." Her English was limited, but her message was crystal clear. My hiking group had essentially adopted me as their group mission. They organized weekend trips that were specifically designed to be healing and restorative, gentle hikes in beautiful locations, followed by communal meals where conversation was encouraged but not required. They treated my recovery as a group priority without making me feel like a charity case. "This is what family looks like," Lisa told me during one of our weekend adventures. "People who show up not because they have to, but because they want to. People who celebrate your successes and support you through difficulties without keeping score." Contrast with my biological family was stark. These people, virtual strangers a year ago, were treating me with more care, respect, and genuine love than the people who had raised me. I was learning that with a family like my biological one, who needs enemies, the revised demand letters had their intended effect. Within a week, I received a cashier's check for $10,000 along with a terse note from Dad. "First payment as requested. This is causing serious financial strain on the family. The irony was palpable. $10,000 was causing them serious strain, while they'd watch me stress myself into cardiac failure over far smaller amounts without concern. But the payment was just the beginning. Jennifer Martinez had done her homework, and what she'd discovered was even more extensive than my bank account investigations had revealed. Your family has been operating a fairly sophisticated financial manipulation scheme, she explained during our follow-up meeting. They've used your credit, your co-signatures, and your direct financial contributions to maintain a lifestyle they couldn't afford on their own, while simultaneously building personal assets they kept hidden from you. The restaurant was essentially a front for funneling your money into their personal accounts. Documentation she'd assembled was damning. Years of financial statements showing the pattern clearly. Money would flow from my accounts to the restaurant, then from the restaurant to their personal accounts, then from their personal accounts to luxury purchases, vacations, and investments I'd never known about. Good news, Jennifer continued, is that this level of documentation makes collection much easier. They can't claim poverty when we have evidence of their actual assets. The bad news is that this represents a level of premeditated deception that suggests they view you purely as a financial resource to be exploited. What are my options? You can continue with civil collection, which is what we're doing now. You can pursue criminal fraud charges, which the evidence would support. Or you can negotiate a lump sum settlement that severs all financial ties permanently. What would you recommend? Jennifer Martinez smiled grimly. Personally, I'd go for the settlement. Get your money back, cut all ties, and move on with your life. People who are capable of this level of long-term manipulation aren't likely to change, and continuing to engage with them, even through the legal system, keeps you connected to their toxicity. We drafted a settlement offer. Immediate payment of the full amount owed, approximately $67,000 including interest, in exchange for complete severance of all financial obligations and a legally binding agreement that they would not contact me for financial assistance in the future. The offer included a deadline, 10 days to accept, or we would proceed with formal legal action including potential criminal referrals. Their response came on day 9. The entire family showed up at my apartment on a Sunday evening like some kind of intervention. Dad, Mom, Michelle, David, even Aunt Patricia and Uncle George. They stood in my hallway like a delegation of disappointment. We need to talk, Dad announced. We can talk through our lawyers, I replied, starting to close the door. Jennifer, wait. Mom's voice was different, smaller, less commanding than usual. Please, just 5 minutes. Against my better judgment, I let them in. They arranged themselves around my small living room like they were staging an intervention, which I realized they probably thought they were. Dad took the lead, which was typical. Jennifer, this has gone far enough. We're willing to admit that we made some mistakes. Mistakes. Poor communication about our financial situation. Not visiting you in the hospital when we should have. The social media posts that sent the wrong message. We acknowledge all of that. I waited for the but. It came quickly. But this legal action is destroying our family. Michelle's career is over. The restaurant will close. David might actually go to jail because we can't afford his legal fees anymore. You're punishing all of us for mistakes that we've apologized for. When did you apologize? We're apologizing now. No, you're acknowledging mistakes while minimizing their impact and demanding that I absorb the consequences of your choices. That's not an apology. Michelle jumped in, tears already flowing. Jenny, I know I hurt you with that post. I know the timing was terrible, but I never meant to make you feel excluded or unwanted. I was just trying to keep everyone's spirits up during a really difficult time. Celebrating my absence? I wasn't celebrating your absence. I was trying to find something positive in a situation where everything felt hopeless. What felt hopeless about it? I was recovering well. The doctors were optimistic. The only thing that should have felt hopeless was having a family member in the ICU and not visiting them. David, surprisingly, was the most direct. Look, we screwed up. We should have visited. We should have been more supportive. But you're using that to destroy all of us financially, and that's not right either. I'm not destroying anyone. I'm collecting on debts you acknowledged you owe. Debts to family aren't real debts. They are when family treats you like a bank instead of a person. Conversation continued in circles for over an hour. They acknowledged specific mistakes while minimizing their impact. They apologized for their behavior while demanding that I absorb the consequences. They expressed concern for my feelings while centering their own financial distress. But most tellingly, not one of them asked how I was feeling now. Not one of them inquired about my recovery. Not one of them acknowledged that their behavior had contributed to the stress that nearly killed me. Finally, Aunt Patricia tried a different approach. "Jennifer, I understand you're hurt, but think about your parents' future. They're in their 60s. The restaurant is their retirement plan. If you destroy that now, they'll have nothing. They have $40,000 in savings plus undisclosed investments. That's more than most people have for retirement. That's not enough to live on. It's more than I've been able to save while subsidizing their lifestyle. You're young, you have time to build wealth. I had time. I spent it building their wealth instead." Meeting ended badly. No resolution, no genuine apology, no acknowledgement of the fundamental issues. Just more manipulation, more minimization, more demands that I prioritize their needs over my own well-being. As they left, Mom delivered one final guilt trip. "I hope you can live with yourself, knowing you chose money over family. I hope you can live with yourselves, knowing you chose money over your daughter's life." Door closed behind them, and I realized it was probably the last time I would see most of them. They accepted the settlement offer on the final day of the deadline. $67,000, paid in full, in exchange for permanent severance of all financial obligations and a legal agreement prohibiting future contact regarding money. The check arrived via certified mail with no accompanying note. Just money, clean and impersonal like a business transaction, which I realized was all our relationship had ever really been. Jennifer Martinez handled the final paperwork, ensuring that all loans were formally forgiven, all co-signatures were removed where possible, and all shared financial obligations were legally severed. I was officially free. "Do you feel?" Dr. Kim asked during our next session. "Lighter," I said, and realized I meant it literally. The constant weight of responsibility for other people's problems, the chronic anxiety about their next crisis, the guilt about not doing enough, it was all gone. Any regrets? I thought about it seriously. I regret that it took a cardiac event to wake me up. I regret that I enabled their dysfunction for so long. I regret that I didn't set boundaries years ago. But do I regret holding them accountable? No. What about the family relationships? What relationships? I was never a daughter or sister to them. I was a resource to be managed. They didn't lose a family member when they lost access to my money. They lost an ATM. The insight was painful but liberating. I had spent 30 years trying to earn love that was never actually on offer. I had confused financial exploitation with family closeness, chronic stress with loyalty, and enabling dysfunction with being a good person. 6 months after my cardiac event, my life looked completely different. I moved into a real apartment, a one-bedroom with hardwood floors, large windows, and enough space for actual furniture. Not because I needed the space, but because I wanted it and could finally afford it. I bought new furniture, not from necessity but from joy. I hung art on the walls, not Michelle's pieces, but work from local artists whose vision actually moved me. I took a vacation, my first real vacation in over a decade. 2 weeks in New Zealand with my hiking group, exploring mountains and coastlines that took my breath away for all the right reasons. I posted photos on social media not to make anyone jealous, but because I was genuinely happy and wanted to share that joy with people who cared about my well-being. Amy and I became business partners in a small tech consulting firm. With the money reclaimed from my family and the savings I was able to accumulate once I stopped funding other people's crises, I had capital to invest in something meaningful. We specialized in helping small businesses optimize their operations. Ironically, everything I'd tried to teach my parents about the restaurant, now being used to help business owners who actually wanted to succeed. Mrs. Chen became like a grandmother to me. When her own family visited from Taiwan, she introduced me as her American daughter, and I felt more welcomed at that dinner table than I ever had at family gatherings with my biological relatives. My hiking group evolved into something deeper, a chosen family of people who supported each other through life's challenges and celebrated each other's victories. When Amy got engaged, we threw her a party. When my hiking buddy Mark lost his job, we rallied around him with practical support and emotional encouragement. When I celebrated my first year of cardiac health, they surprised me with a cake and a framed photo from our New Zealand adventure. This was what family was supposed to look like. People who chose to be in each other's lives, who contributed to each other's well-being, who showed up during difficult times without keeping score. I'd been no contact with my biological family for 8 months when I learned through mutual friends that the restaurant had finally closed. Not because of my refusal to continue funding it, but because Dad had gotten involved in another get-rich-quick scheme that drained their remaining resources. Michelle had moved to Portland, where she was working as a barista while trying to break into the art scene. She'd started a blog about surviving family trauma that painted herself as the victim of a sister who had chosen money over blood loyalty. The irony was apparently lost on her. David had avoided jail time by pleading guilty to a lesser charge, but his legal troubles continued. Without my financial safety net, he'd been forced to face the actual consequences of his choices for the first time in his adult life. My parents had moved into a smaller apartment and were both working retail jobs to make ends meet. According to mutual friends, they spoke about me with a mixture of anger and bewilderment, unable to understand how their reliable daughter had suddenly turned against the family. I felt nothing. No satisfaction at their struggles, no guilt about not helping, no sadness about the severed relationships. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. Just like I had finally learned to do, Dr. Kim and I continued our sessions, transitioning from crisis management to long-term healing and growth. She helped me understand the generational patterns that had led to the family dysfunction, my parents' own traumatic childhoods, their unhealthy relationship with money and responsibility, the way they'd unconsciously replicated patterns from their own families. Understanding doesn't mean excusing, she reminded me regularly. You can have compassion for their wounds while still protecting yourself from their behavior. I learned about healthy boundaries, authentic relationships, and the difference between love and enablement. I learned that saying no wasn't selfish, it was necessary. I learned that protecting my own well-being wasn't cruel, it was survival. Most importantly, I learned that we all need to stop being the bigger person, going along to get along, stop being the free ATM, baby sister, or tech support. Let the guilty and the lazy get their comeuppance. The phrase became my personal mantra. For too many years, I had absorbed other people's problems to keep the peace. I had enabled dysfunction in the name of family harmony. I had set myself on fire to keep others warm. Never again. A year and a half after my cardiac event, I received an unexpected message on social media. It was from Michelle, the first contact from any family member since the settlement. Hi, Jenny. I know we haven't talked, and I'm not reaching out to ask for anything. I just wanted you to know that I've been in therapy, and I'm starting to understand some things about our family that I never saw before. I know I hurt you badly, and I know my apology probably doesn't mean much now, but I am truly sorry. Not because I want something from you, but because I realize how much pain I caused someone I claim to love. I hope you're doing well. You deserved so much better from all of us. I stared at the message for a long time. It was different from the previous attempts at reconciliation. No manipulation, no requests, no minimization of the damage done. Just acknowledgement and genuine remorse. I didn't respond immediately. I showed it to Dr. Kim, discussed it with Amy, and took time to really think about what, if anything, I wanted to do with this overture. Finally, after a week of consideration, I sent a brief reply. Thank you for the message. I appreciate the acknowledgement and I'm glad you're getting help. I'm doing well and have built a good life for myself. I wish you the same. Short, cordial, but with clear boundaries. I didn't offer reconciliation, didn't invite further contact, but I also didn't slam the door completely closed. If Michelle was genuinely changing, time would tell. If not, I was protected by boundaries that had been tested and proven strong. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I think about the person I used to be. The Jennifer who worked 60-hour weeks to fund other people's dreams. The Jennifer who had panic attacks in grocery stores because she was calculating everything in terms of work hours. The Jennifer who lived in a studio apartment and drove a 10-year-old car so her family could have nice things. The Jennifer who nearly died from the stress of carrying everyone else's burdens. That Jennifer was kind, generous, loyal, and self-sacrificing. She was also miserable, exhausted, exploited, and slowly killing herself trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it. The new Jennifer is still kind, but selectively so. Still generous, but with boundaries. Still loyal, but only to people who reciprocate that loyalty. Still willing to help others, but not at the expense of her own well-being. I've learned that there's a difference between being a good person and being a useful person. I spent 30 years being useful to my family while they took my goodness for granted. Now I focus on being good to people who value and reciprocate that goodness. I've learned that family isn't about blood or shared history or obligation. Family is about people who choose to love and support you, who show up during difficult times, who celebrate your successes without jealousy, who care about your well-being as much as their own. I've learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're gates. They keep out the people who would harm you while allowing in the people who truly care about you. Most importantly, I've learned that you don't have to accept poor treatment from anyone, even especially family members. Love without respect isn't love at all. Support without reciprocity isn't support. Family without genuine care isn't family. It's been 2 years since I collapsed on that conference room floor. 2 years since I nearly died alone while my family celebrated my absence. 2 years since I learned the difference between people who love you and people who love what you can do for them. My life now is smaller in some ways and infinitely larger in others. Smaller because my circle is more selective, because I no longer try to maintain relationships with people who drain my energy and exploit my kindness. Larger because I'm finally living for myself, pursuing my own dreams, building my own future. I have a chosen family of people who would never post a no-drama photo while I'm in the hospital. People who show up not when they need something, but when I need someone. People who celebrate my presence instead of my absence, who treat my well-being as important as their own problems. The cardiac event that nearly killed me also saved my life. It forced me to confront the truth about relationships that I'd been avoiding for decades. It showed me that the people who claimed to love me most were actually the ones who cared about me least. But it also led me to discover real love, genuine support, and authentic family, just not where I expected to find them. If you're reading this and recognizing your own story and mine, I want you to know something. You don't have to be the family ATM. You don't have to absorb other people's crises to prove your love. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. Your worth isn't measured by your usefulness. Your love isn't proven by your willingness to be exploited. Your family isn't defined by genetics. It's defined by who chooses to stay and support you when you need them most. The people who will betray you for money or convenience, who will celebrate your absence, who will ignore your pain until they need your help, those people have shown you exactly who they are. Believe them, and then choose better. Choose people who would never tag you in a celebration post while you're fighting for your life. Choose people who show up not just when they need something, but when you need someone. Choose people who treat your well-being as sacred, who support your dreams as enthusiastically as their own, who love you not for what you can provide, but for who you are. Choose family that chooses you back. That's what I did, and it made all the difference. Because in the end, blood doesn't always equal loyalty. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who share your name. And sometimes the people who save your life are the ones you choose to let in. My story proves it. Real family isn't about who you're related to. It's about who would never abandon you when you're gasping for air on a cold conference room floor. And those people, they're worth everything.